Hi, Jordan.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Clint. We ready to go?
Yeah,
Oh.
it looks like it's just 6 o'clock now, so we can start.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for taking your time, everyone, for being here again this evening. And I will be chairing until such time as Chair Shipston may join us. At any time through this meeting, if you need to say something, would like to say something, just make sure you get our attention, and we want everyone to have their say. So the agenda, be it resolved that the committee confirm the agenda as presented. If everyone has had a chance to look at the agenda, could we have a motion? Carolyn, moved. Seconder? Joan? Okay, so we'll confirm the agenda as presented. Item 3, declaration of pecuniary interest. This is the time that if anyone feels they have a conflict, that this is the time to mention that. And seeing no indication that there is, we will move on. So under item 4, delegations and presentations, we are really a little fortunate to have Anne-Marie Shaw here with us again. Anne-Marie has been working in housing in our area for a long time, and she is always willing to listen and share information. And so, Anne-Marie, thank you again for your time tonight, and we will listen to your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm always pleased to be able to talk about housing. I'm just wondering, am I going to be sharing my screen, Holly?
I was just going to ask, you do have the ability to if you'd like, but if you'd prefer for me to do it, I can do it as well.
I do, but it says that you've disabled me as a participant to do that.
Okay.
So
1 second.
if it's easier for you to share, Holly, that's fine with me too. There's not a lot of slides. So
You should be good to share now.
okay. All right. Can everyone see that okay? Great. Okay, so one of the, in the email that Holly shared with me, she had said that this group was interested in what is a municipality's role and what is the county's role in housing. Housing is very multifaceted. As you know, there's all types of different housing that's required. And so the county itself has some that we are responsible for directly, and then others that we work with community. And then, of course, there is our own municipalities that would be more on that planning side of ensuring that there are all types of and price types of housing. I think in the past, 5+ years, the housing crisis has made that line blur a little bit in the fact that it's becoming evident that anybody, any group that's willing to look at housing is welcome because we have such a shortage of housing. So a little bit about the county's role. We are the service system manager for Grey County, meaning that we look after any of the provincial programs and provincially directed housing in various areas. We do manage housing, so we have our own rent geared to income housing, and that is something that the county is responsible for solely, is that rent geared to income. And rent geared to income housing was as a legacy program. It was originally the province that started this, and then it was downloaded to the county or to the service manager in 2000. And that is housing that assumes or that makes sure that it is 30% of a person's income, or if you're on ODSP or Ontario Works, and it would be a scale, so it would be $139 a month that you would be paying. So that is the type of house that housing is part of the county's role. We also have nonprofit housing providers. We have 9 of them throughout Grey County. And again, this is part of, they were originally provincially funded and then downloaded to the county in 2000. We provide a subsidy, but each of these nonprofit providers have their own housing board and are governed by that board. But they all have a mix of rent geared to income, affordable, and market rents, and we provide that subsidy towards the rent geared to income. We provide access in the way that we manage the wait list. So if someone is looking for housing, they do not have to call each individual housing building or nonprofit provider. We provide that list. We ensure that everybody qualifies for that housing, and then we make offers of housing once. So a nonprofit would notify us that they have a 1-bedroom available. We would look who's next chronologically on that list, and we would provide that information to them, and then they can make those offers. We make the offers for our own housing. Providing options. So we do look at that continuum of housing, right from homelessness and emergency housing right up to affordable rental. And that affordable rental is more in those recent years, in the last 10 to 15 years, probably 10 years, the province has had funding available for developing affordable. So rent geared to income housing is very hard to make work operating now. It used to work 30, 40 years ago when it was built. Now the operating doesn't work. Our people, singles that are on Ontario Works or Ontario Disability, pay $139 a month. So there's no way that you can run a housing without subsidy, without a lot of subsidy. So the province changed their build model about 10 years ago to a more affordable. And so those are based on Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation's averages that they provide for an area. So for instance, we're around $650 a month is what an affordable build would be here. There still are subsidy programs to help build, but the funds just aren't there at this point. Meeting complex needs. So we also have a 10-year housing and homelessness plan, and what that means is it's actually from 2014 to 2024. We did an update about 4 years ago, and we'll be doing another update next year. And what that means is because we're at the local level, we can look around and see what are the local priorities, and then we can set our housing goals towards those local priorities. In other areas, in other provinces, it is the provincial government that works directly maybe with a town or a city, but they are the ones that own responsibility over housing. Ontario is unique in the fact that we're the only one that it actually has been downloaded to the counties or the service manager in order to provide that local flair. So here's what I call our continuum of housing. And you'll notice for the county, we focus in on the homelessness, the emergency shelter part of it, the transitional, and the social housing. That is our responsibility there. Not our responsibility to provide every single piece of housing there, but to work with community members, nonprofits, for-profits, in order to provide that housing on those first 4. We dive a little bit into the affordable rental in the fact that there have been some provincial programs in the last 10 years or so to build that affordable housing. But the rest of it, the affordable home ownership, the market rental and the market home ownership, that's where your municipalities come into place and your planners. And that's where your planners are looking at what types of housing are needed for your area, what kind of affordability is needed. And one of the things that we have done as a county is the Department of Housing and Planning have worked together to provide a affordable housing plan moving forward, looking at Grey County, but looking at individual areas as to what is needed. So we look at the monetary aspect, what percent of housing is required for somebody making 50,000 and below, 50 to 60, 60 to 70. So those are things that our planning department has been looking at doing. They're just introducing an affordable housing plan, looking at what types of housing that need to be built and how do we attract that housing? How do we attract our private developers to develop the housing that we require? We are looking also at a housing forum in the fall, and there'll be a lot more information to come for that. I don't think we've set a date for it yet, but there will be something coming from the fall, sort of introducing more of this. So a little bit about our subsidized housing. We subsidize about 1,931 units of housing across the county. We have our own units, 994 of them. We recently just completed, well, we're almost complete, 12 transitional units in Grey County. We're working with the Canadian Mental Health Association in order to provide 24/7 staffing for this. And so this would be working with our people that are experiencing chronic homelessness. So they would be in a program for up to 2 years if necessary, somewhere between 6 months and 2 years, and then hopefully moved on to a different type of housing so other people can get that more intensive supports. And those supports would be looking at mental health and addictions. It would be looking at your daily living skills, primary care, peer support. So just preparing someone for being able to live independently or even semi-independently, depending on what that next step of housing would be. And that's hoping to be opening this fall. We're actually just waiting to hear from the Ministry, or Canadian Mental Health Association is waiting to hear from the Ministry of Health on funding. We just recently built 11 transitional units with our nonprofits. We have 582 units of nonprofit housing in which we support the rent geared to income house portions of it. We have 72 rent supplements that we work with in our affordable housing. We have 70 units with housing with support. So that would be somewhere like your Ayton Lodge or your Second Ave Lodge, in which we provide supports to the people that access it. We don't own it or run it, but we do provide funds for people to stay there. We have 35 shelter spaces right now, and we have 135 provincial portable housing benefits. This is a provincial program in which the county has a pot of money, but it is actually, the application goes into the province, and we assist the people to apply for this program, and it would supplement a certain amount of money. It's around the $235 mark, I think, to go towards their rent. And we also have 20 rent supplements for transitional units in private market. So some of the options that we use in order to try and create more affordable is looking at, again, rent supplements. If someone's where they are and it's appropriate and adequate housing, but the only problem is the affordability, then it makes more sense for us to try and assist them to be where they are. We have a co-investment nonprofit or program in which we work with our nonprofits to see if they can develop more housing. We look for transitional housing opportunities wherever that may be, whether it's with some of our community agencies, whether ourselves or with our nonprofits. We're looking inward to see if there's any areas in which we could develop. We are working, our planning department is working with municipalities on getting a land bank together. So if we know that there is a property that might work for a future build, then we look to try and ensure that property has been identified and that it's zoned properly so that a developer might be interested in developing on it. And we look at waiving fees and incentives. One of the things we have started is an affordable housing fund. That fund is 1% of our annual levy contribution, which is around $650,000. And we do receive around $500,000 to $600,000 annually to build from the province. Those funds can also be used for other capital projects. They do have to be used within the year though, so that does make them very difficult to use for a build. But again, when we have builds and we have all the money that's lined up and ready to go, we access those funds. Otherwise, we will put it towards capital. We are divesting some of our property. We have some of our older wartime houses in which we are selling and then using that funding to develop newer housing. think I've covered all of that. Some of the things that we have on the go right now. We just supported a nonprofit to build 60 units of, it's a mix of affordable and market in Owen Sound, and that just opened in the fall, and people moved in, I believe, October, November, December. We just assisted 11 transitional units this winter. They were opened in February. There is a nonprofit in Owen Sound that has a plan for 40 seniors units, but we're waiting for funding. Just to give you an idea, to build those units, it came in at $19 million. So certainly something, right now with interest rates and the cost of developing, it's very, or the cost of construction, it's a hard sell right now. We have 135 portable rent supplements that we have been able to offer during the past 3 years, and that is an average of $280 a month for people. We still are interested in our affordable housing build in Dundalk, and again, it's at this time just looking for those funds and figuring out how we can make that build work. And our focus right now is on our short-term shelter program. We have funding right now for 25, actually now we've got 35 beds a night, but we require 50 plus. Homelessness has tripled in the last 2 years in our community. We now have 100 people that are on our homelessness list for people that are looking, that are experiencing chronic homelessness and have, which means that they're homeless for more than 6 months out of a year. So right now, that is our focus. We recently took a report to council in how we would like to relook what we're doing. Our motel program that we've used has worked wonderfully for years because it provided opportunity for people to stay where they are in Grey County. And Grey County is such a vast area. It provided options for people. We used about 4 or 5 different motels throughout the area, and it seemed to work. Right now, we're finding it's working less and less for people. A lot of the people that are seeking assistance with housing that are homelessness have multiple barriers, and a motel does not always work. So 24/7 supports may be needed. Maybe the person needs only a few hours of support, or needs multiple supports. Maybe they need a nurse practitioner. They need some mental health or addictions counseling, some skills that are provided for daily living. So we're trying now to make that our system has options. So different types of housing options for people. We have entered into an agreement with Safe and Sound for a warming center. That'll be from November to April. We have the 14th Street opening hopefully soon with 24/7 support. So that'll take care of some of our most needy people for housing. And we have still our short-term shelter program, but we're hoping to open up and look for different options. And that means acquiring buildings and also paying for supports. So just looking at different ways to use the funds that we currently have. And that is my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, excuse me. Yes, first of all, thank you, Anna Marie. I think it's, we sometimes get focused in on what is not working and what is not happening. And we have to keep in mind that there are some things happening, some really good things happening, and thanks to you and your group. Any thoughts or questions for Anna Marie? Nola? Go ahead, Nola.
Yeah, thank you. That was a really comprehensive presentation. Would you say that the Township of Southgate has a homelessness in terms of people living on the streets, or is that in other parts of Grey County? And I'm just trying to, like, in my mind, figure out what the actual need is here. And then to my thinking, we have a need for affordable housing for people that are making minimum wage up to maybe, $30 an hour kind of thing. Like, there's nothing for that group. So I just wondered, does the Township of Southgate have a responsibility or a need to get into the transitional supported type of housing that you've done a good job of presenting here? Or is our area really at the affordable rental and affordable home ownership area. I don't know what.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I would say that in rural areas, homelessness can sometimes be hidden. So people are couch surfing or they're living in structures that are probably not meant to be lived in for year round. It's a little bit different than in the cities where we see it more visible. I can say in Hanover and in Owen Sound, homelessness is certainly a little bit more visible, and that's probably our two main areas. Areas where there's services, we tend to see more people flock to those areas too. Where there's hospitals, where there's more services, that's where we tend to see more people experiencing homelessness. It also, for people experiencing homelessness, they need more than just a shelter. They need those supports to go with it. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. So really, township wise, municipality wise, I would focus in on that more attainable housing, that affordable attainable. That's where the municipality has some ability to make headway, working with your planning department, identifying what type of housing is needed, working with developers. Those are certainly areas that a municipality can have an impact. Not to say that, if a community group popped up and said, hey, we're interested in working with people experiencing homelessness, we would certainly support that community group the best we could too. Probably more of a support from the county, but there's always room to work together with all levels of government.
Thank you very much. And I would say that I just in thinking about homelessness, I think you can be homeless and still have a job in the sense of what I'm talking about. The truly homeless don't even have jobs. They can't, they're unemployable. And they do need all those wraparound services and the seniors and all that. So if we as a committee were to focus in on what you were just suggesting, the affordable rentals and the affordable housing, which I think has to be sort of out of the market, right? Like a non-market kind of a approach to it. Like the municipality really does need to be involved, I think, in terms of, maybe forming a not-for-profit corporation that looks into the land trust, like acquiring the land, the surplus land, and looking for those buildings that could be converted somehow at some point, and then also looking for any developers at some point that want to get involved in that kind of thing. But I think it would be a good start, I think.
I agree. Go ahead? Can I go ahead and answer that, Jerry? Am I okay to do that? Okay.
Yes,
I think that, yes, there's lots of examples with that with municipalities. One of them might be acquiring land, making sure it's zoned properly and that it's ready to go for a developer, even putting out an RFI, request for information or proposal, to see if there's a developer that's interested. So, if you're providing the land, then in return, you're expecting so many units of affordable housing for so many years. That might be attractive to someone. Or like you said, purchasing a building that has renovation potential and, offering that up at maybe, getting half of your money back, or I don't know what that looks like, but there certainly have been examples of, and that's part of what the county is doing with the land bank. And we are working with all the municipalities to look at, are there lands that might be tagged for affordable? And likely they're not going to be able to do all affordable, just money wise, the numbers may not work, but there might be able to, a portion of it, a percentage of it could certainly be affordable. And then of course, identifying what is needed. Is it rental? If you're looking at, are you focusing in on rental, or are you focusing in on, townhomes, that sort of thing? And that can be done by looking at your local statistics as to your population. And not only that, but, if you have a population between 30 and 40, that's your highest. What's that income level and what kind of housing is needed? And talking to your local planner can help, because I know that there's been a lot of work done with our planning department and local planning departments too.
Thank you very much. I just have one last question, which I'll leave with you. Do you know of any examples where, like, I just have visions of where ghettos have been created of low income. And are there any good examples where it's not a ghetto, it's a mixture of socioeconomic brackets where the township in this case would sort of guarantee that there's a certain percentage of low to middle income and the rest would be whoever else came along? Are there any good examples of that as opposed to getting into sort of a ghetto type thing? Where you just have a whole big.
Yes. So all of the affordable housing bills that have been happening over the last 10 years have been a mix of market and affordable. And just for that reason alone, is that, it's excellent to have examples for your neighbors, and, neighbors that the diversity should be there. Any neighborhood is only better if it's diverse, right? So I think that some of the examples would be Owen Sound Municipal Nonprofit. They have developed quite a few housing units in the past few years, and all of theirs are a mix of market and affordable.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions? Anne-Marie, we've been given sort of an unofficial indication from one of our social agencies working in our area that we have not seen the worst yet, that it's coming. Have you any advice for us as a committee attached to council? Anything that we can be thinking about now to start getting something in place so that we can try to stay up a little bit with what's coming? That's not a fair question, I'm sure, or maybe it's one that you're asked like a dozen times a day.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. They say that it's probably not going to peak. The housing crisis isn't going to peak for another 5 years. And especially when it comes to people experiencing homelessness too. There's, COVID was very tough on a lot of families and a lot of individuals. And we're certainly are still seeing our number of people experiencing homelessness climbing. Unfortunately, it's funding too, right? There hasn't been a level of funding coming from the province to keep up with housing for people that require services. When it comes to the market, I think it's a really difficult question. I don't know whether you've had your local planner attend. But maybe that's more of a question for them locally as to how they see, being able to encourage more affordable housing in the next 5 years. Thinking outside the box and really having a look at, just because we did it this way doesn't mean we should continue to do it this way, helps. And I think prepping, things like being prepared. I also want to say that because we're very small scale, I mean, our tax base is small and we don't have a lot of funding or tax dollars to do probably what we need to do. Other levels of government are going to have to be key when it comes to solving the housing crisis.
Jerry, I have a question.
Let's go ahead, Joan.
Yeah, sorry. Hi, Anne-Marie.
Hi, Joan.
I know a person that is facing homelessness, living in the Dundalk area, a standalone parent with 3 children. Is there a number that she can call, or what is the process for getting into a home or something, or
Sure.
shelter?
So she can call our office. The short-term shelter program is located out of our office, 519-376. Oh, sorry, did that not go? 519-376-5744. And if it's after hours and she finds herself in dire straits at any point, 211 can help put her up somewhere, and then we can connect with her in the morning. Through our shelter program, right now, again, we're using motels in the area, and we meet with people every day at the motels and try and help them with a plan for housing. So we're not always successful because there's just not enough housing, but we try our best. So.
Thank you. Nola, I have a question for you. Did you say ghetto or gutter when you were talking about the
ghetto, like when you have a bunch of like we have many examples around the world of low-income housing that just went into disrepair, with one socioeconomic bracket being there. And there's some that are starting to come up, be developed around the world where you get the mix, the cross-sectoral, like the socioeconomic mix, because the cities have they've been proactive and they've done these land trusts and put out bids to private developers who must agree to, keep a certain percentage of the units affordable for low to middle income families. It just ends up being a much more beautiful space when you get that mix of socioeconomic people in there, and you don't get that divide, as opposed to looking at putting affordable housing, doing it cheaply on the wrong side of the tracks kind of an attitude, doing it right, doing it well, that kind of a thing, so that everybody can benefit from good housing. So
I think
I know.
Sorry, go ahead, Joan.
No, I was just going to say, I know there is a divide, and I know that they're also trying to change that term from ghetto because it's very offensive and also very discriminating. So that was just the reason why I asked about that. And Anne-Marie, I'm sure you know that too. They're just kind of trying to work into that theme about living in a ghetto or calling that place a ghetto or how it is termed. Thank you.
Quite
Understood.
honestly, Joan, it is more the landlord's issue of not keeping the buildings up that they go. Yeah.
Just related to the mixed housing, I think we rely on our planners too to help us understand how we can encourage some mixed housing builds too. Anyway, one question, Anne-Marie, you've already mentioned it, I think, when you talked about the funding, but the Rose Lane development in Dundalk, is there even a really rough timeline?
Not yet. Our focus at the county, I think we did not foresee, and maybe we should have, but we did not foresee homelessness tripling in the last 2 years. So a lot of our funds and focus right now is on that immediate. But what we are looking at is preparing the site. So we have been working to relocate people. And so we are going to look at probably tearing it down so that we're prepared and ready for when funding does arrive. A lot of the funding that comes from the province, you have to be shovel ready. So if we were to apply for funding today, we probably would not be able to access it. Number one, because people are still living there. And number two, because it would have to be actually demolished before we could actually start a build. So we want to get that site prepped and have a plan in place for it so that when funds are available from the province or we end up trying to figure out a way to fund it at the county, then it's ready to go. So probably more to come this fall. We should probably we will be working with the township this fall to put together some sort of plan whether it comes to just prepping the site and then looking at what a future build might be.
Sure. Should we be encouraged by the $97 million that was just given from the federal government to the city of Toronto to help house refugees that are sleeping on the streets? Is that a sign of maybe some loosening of federal money, do you suppose?
We have not heard of any that would make it down to our level at this point. We did have some funds that were released for our homelessness funds, and the government locked in for the same amount for 3 years for us. So we'll just have to see where we go. We are looking at how can we better use those funds and how can we use our community partners better. There was a rapid housing initiative that the federal government put out. There were a number of local applications that went in. Unfortunately, I don't know of any that were funded. So again, people are trying, they're doing their best, putting in the applications, doing all of the work. And believe me, it is a lot of work to apply for any federal funding. But unfortunately, we just for one reason or another. The one we worked with one of our nonprofits to apply, and again, it was because they just didn't feel that they would be able to start within the timelines of that 4 months.
Okay.
The question, Jerry,
Go.
but this is for you and Ollie. I totally forgot. I have a friend that had met with the Ontario government for incentive on manufacturing and affordable housing in a small town. And I spoke to him about this meeting, and then I totally forget to ask Ollie if it was okay to invite somebody that does not live in the township to be on the meeting. But I know that he's in talk with the Ontario government for building affordable houses. And he was halfway through getting funding, but it was about, so he was asking me if I know of any place that these housing could be built, but sorry.
Sure.
Totally.
I think, Joan, maybe what we'll do, we'll just put a pin in that for a minute. Any last comments or thoughts for Anne-Marie? We do appreciate you taking your time, Anne-Marie, as always. And it is good to stay updated on what's happening. And we continue to think about the idea of a nonprofit housing corporation. We sort of see that as one of the things that is going to see us be able to sort of start to reserve some units that can remain affordable and attainable for rentals. So again, I'd just like to thank you very much. You're most welcome to stay for the rest of our meeting, or you're welcome to go as well. But thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you. And anytime, if I can come and do an update on anything or answer questions, I'm more than willing, but I am going to go and have supper. So thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Maybe Holly, could we deal with Joan's thought about inviting people from outside the area? You would like to have anybody who's going to present or take part, you'd kind of like to know beforehand, wouldn't you, Holly? Or
Yeah,
how does that work?
Yeah, so if they were going to delegate to the committee, we would have to put it on the agenda. So it does need to meet the required agenda timelines in the procedural bylaw. Unless the agenda was amended, which it wasn't at the start of this meeting. But certainly if they were looking to come to the next meeting, we could put them on then.
So I would just encourage everyone to continue having conversations with whoever will have a conversation with us about housing, and anything that looks promising, direct it to Martin or to myself or to Holly. And if we can get a presentation out of any of this information, I think that we think would be valuable for the committee, we will do so.
I will send it in for the next meeting, and maybe I will tell him that he can listen in on one of the meetings, and then he can probably make a presentation.
Sure. And these meetings are public, are they not, Holly?
Yes, they are streamed onto YouTube, like all of the committee and council meetings. So people can watch them live, and then they do stay there if people wanted to watch them back as well.
Okay, so could you tell me the name of the link, Ollie? I could just ask him to watch for the rest of the meeting, and then he could have an idea.
Sure. So it's youtube.com. And then I think it's /@ Southgate Township. But even if he just searched on YouTube Township of Southgate, it would come up.
Okay.
And just before we go any further, Jerry, we do need a mover and seconder for receiving the presentation as information.
Okay, yes. Could I have someone to make a motion? Muriel, a seconder? Carolyn? Be it resolved that the committee receive the County of Grey housing presentation for information. That's carried. Okay, moving to item 5, adoption of minutes. You've had a chance to look at the minutes. Any errors, omissions? If not, could we have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes? Nola makes the motion. A seconder, Carolyn. Thank you. Be it resolved that the committee approve the minutes from the June 2023 Affordable Attainable Housing Committee meeting as presented. Okay, then moving on to item 6, staff updates. There is none.
Jerry, before we move on, I just wonder if it would be timely for us to zero in on what was just shared with us by making some kind of recommendation to council about what we intend to target in terms of affordable housing, because I think that's important to give us clarity in terms of what we're doing and what we're trying to address. And even if you're having builders come in now or developers, then they know what kind of developments we'd be looking to do. Is this something that we could do in light of what was just shared?
Sure. Holly, go ahead.
So we do have a motion about a resolution about mixed units that was passed at the February meeting. I'm not sure if that's what you're meaning, Nola. If it was something we would want to do, we certainly could do it on the spot, but I do think that it is probably best to have a discussion perhaps with Clinton and come up with something so that we are able to make sure that the motion is exactly what you want it to be.
So
that
like the committee or the committee or me? I don't know I'm not sure what you mean. The discussion.
So going back to February, we did have a resolution where we talked about housing mix. And that would normally, then the resolution would go to council, but it has not yet. Is that correct, Holly? Or Clint? I guess I'm not still trying to understand the
what I'm referring to is the actual housing more geared to low and middle income, like the affordable rent and the affordable homeownership piece, as opposed to getting I think it's almost getting us off track when we start talking about homeless shelters and everything else, because I don't think that's what the issue is here. And I could be wrong, but I think the issue is the affordable rentals and affordable housing for that missing middle, because we have a lot of high-end housing, but for those couples that may both be working and they can't afford a house, they can't get in the game, that kind of thing.
Okay. Carolyn and then Holly. Carolyn, go ahead.
Yeah, and Holly might actually be the one more to speak. I'm just wondering if that doesn't change some of our terms of reference and it doesn't change our priorities a bit if we are narrowing our focus, which may be the appropriate thing to do. If the nonprofits are more geared towards a county, maybe it is more appropriate for us to narrow our focus. But that, I think, might be a big shift. And so we might not be able to just pass a resolution. Like, we might have to think this through to think about whether that is actually shifting the focus of the committee and then what needs to be changed if it is. I don't understand the procedures about that. I don't have that knowledge, but so Holly, you might. I don't know if you're thinking the same line or what the next step is.
Holly, yes?
Yeah, so I do believe that the resolution from February did say something about a percentage of an income. I would have to look back in the minutes. I don't know it off the top of my head. To my knowledge, Clinton has that report prepared to be coming to our next council meeting, I believe, but he would have to confirm. And certainly that is something that the committee could do. I do think that it would need to be its own agenda item. It's not like if we were looking to change the terms of reference to focus in on something more specific, that is something that we could do. I don't think that it's wise to do that with just a resolution, and perhaps needs a bit more legwork than just coming up with something on the spot. However, it is the committee's decision. If they wanted to make a recommendation to council, we could. And then also just to keep in mind that it's because it's not an agenda item, we haven't given notice, so we would need to do that if we were going to bring it to the next one.
I would like to see it on the agenda for the next one. I think we do need to consult, and I think a focus would be helpful, especially and I think Clinton needs to get in on this too. But I mean, if we're
Certainly,
going
I will do that. Then I'll add it as an item on the next agenda and we can discuss it at that time.
perfect.
I think we were warned by Clinton, actually, and advised by Clinton, actually, several months ago, just about being very careful about what we put in resolutions, that what we think that we're asking for may not be what we get. And if things change, our resolution may actually hinder us. So I agree, Noel, I think this needs to be discussed. And Holly, thanks for your advice. Clinton, I think we rely on your expertise in terms of just a general comment about what Anne-Marie presented and the direction of this committee. Have you got any advice for us at this point that would help us start to consolidate our thinking a little bit? We need to be thinking about another set of recommendations to council. So that can start any time.
If I,
Yeah.
okay. So, the first thing is the resolution from February was a very specific resolution that I believe it said that it require all developers to have 30% affordable housing or something to that nature. So in saying, like, in just having that blanket statement out there, requiring them isn't really within our ability to do. We can request it and to try and reach that goal from a, so when I bring forward my report, it'll state what your resolution was at the time. And for that particular one, I'll be sort of explaining what we as a municipality can and can't do when I bring that forward. So we certainly can request density changes because that is within our purview of and responsibility in both the Planning Act and provincial policy statement to suggest different densities than what have been historically done, and that's actually taking place. If you look in some of the newer subdivisions now, a lot of times more than half of the development is townhomes, because townhomes is a more affordable option for selling units, and it's not ideal in terms of maybe having your own space and everyone having single family, but it's certainly something that's more affordable than the single family option, which has been the historical development of the past. So a lot of the development now has a mix of that in there, of townhouses, semis, and we're trying to encourage even apartments, low-level apartments, that like the 3 or 4 story apartments to help with that. But that's just where we have our policy limits where we can say this is what we'd like you to get to, but there's also other options that the province has given us that we think are just as good at helping to provide places to live, and that's the secondary unit policies, that where someone can renovate, and this is specific to Dundalk, can renovate above their garage, for example, and turn that into an apartment or a living space, or their basement as a separate apartment. Those are all options within the legislation that can be done. The only requirement is that you have 1 parking space for the new unit. So 1 additional parking space, I should say. So that is certainly an option to provide quick housing without having to create new lots, without having to go through much in the way of zoning or other things. You go through a permit process to obviously make sure your new unit is up to par as far as building code and fire code is concerned. But beyond that, that is the quick route to providing additional housing units at a more affordable rate than waiting for a developer to come in and make a small percentage of it affordable housing for a period of time. Because as you know, the first buyer gets the affordable price. The second buyer gets the market price. So that's the problem when it's done by a developer, if it's like ownership as opposed to rental, that it's a very temporary thing, and it often gets gobbled up by the market because there are so few units in play. The only other thing I want to add right now is that depending on how you want to look at it, fortunately or unfortunately, I will not be around in August for the meeting. I'm going on holidays. So if you bring it to this motion to the next meeting, I won't be able to be there for the discussion. So I apologize for that, but I'm off to the East Coast for a couple of weeks.
Okay. Nola and then Holly.
I'm going to be, I'm sorry, I have to leave to go to another meeting. And I just wanted to say that I think where I was going with that, I probably used the wrong language and got a whole set of discussions going about, resolutions. But I think for our purposes, I think we have to be clear. I think it would help us to be clear on what we're looking to do. And I'm thinking about the presentation Clint did about the surplus land that he pointed out to us, and just thinking ahead, and just, how it was pointed out by, the presenter today, that being prepared and knowing what you want to do and being shovel ready. I also think that I think we need to change our mindset a little bit. And I don't know if this is something that this committee can also recommend to council, but if these units are affordable, there's nothing to say they can't stay affordable in perpetuity. Like, they don't have to go to the market. I mean, that could be something that could be baked into the cake, so to speak, if we kind of, think outside the box. There's different ways to approach this. And let's not forget, there's these community bonds that are happening, that where the community comes together and creates this vehicle where there can be investment in the community. And that seems to be a much faster way to get the capital needed to get these projects going. And so I just think about those lands that Clinton mentioned. I think that would be something to be thinking about. And I think heading towards getting that nonprofit, that housing corporation going, so that they could be tasked with moving forward with some of those things, because it takes some thinking to do that. But you want the township on board. We have to consult on this a whole lot more. And I'm sorry if I kind of used the wrong word, and I apologize. So anyway, I think that, sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing, if I could, Jerry.
Yes.
So in addition to my report dealing with the density, I'll also be bringing a report based on my recommendations for those two lots to have the municipality preserve them or keep them, to allow further investigation and or preparation to make them shovel ready, if you will. But that's sort of the next step is, okay, well, what do we need to do? And is there a cost involved to that? If that's the case, as an example, do we have to do some sort of environmental review of it? Or one of the steps was zoning. Do we have to do zoning on them? Those kinds of things. So once we get the municipalities to agree not to sell them until we've had a chance to investigate them, there is no plans to sell them anyways at the present time, but we'd like it in writing kind of thing that they're not going to. That's sort of my recommendation right now. And as far as the scoping, what this committee does, I don't think that goes against the mandate at all. The mandate is so broad that in order to get something done, it's probably better that you do narrow your focus and only focus on a few things, as opposed to something the county is already doing. Maybe do something more locally specific.
Right. Okay. All right. And that recommendation, Clint, for the preserving or protecting those two properties, is there a chance that might go to the council for August 3rd?
Yes, it will be going to that meeting.
Perfect. Okay, Nola, we will let you go, and thank you very much for your contributions tonight. Clint, thank you for the staff update that we didn't have on our agenda. And Holly, I think you were wanting to say something a few minutes ago.
Oh, no, it's okay. I'll just send Nola an email. I was just going to ask her if she could let me know what it was that she specifically wanted on the agenda, but I'll follow up with her after the meeting. She's left already.
Okay, all right. Okay, all right. Thank you very much for that discussion. I think the fact that there are some things happening at the county level, it's good to see that the things that are happening, and then yes, it makes sense for us not to sort of double over the same ground. But should we have those properties protected, that one in Dundalk, for example, that maybe gives us a little bit of leverage or some bargaining power with developers then, and maybe we don't know what might come out of it, but the first step would be to protect the properties. So, okay, moving on. Item 7, new unfinished business. Jordan has worked hard on a information resource and a strategy, communication strategy update. And maybe I'll just let you, Jordan, if you wouldn't mind just taking us through that. And I think you'll be looking for support from the committee, I would think, so that it can be released. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Jordan, did you want
Hey,
to?
good evening, everybody. If I could just, Holly, have those attachments brought up. You can just start with the overview one and go through them one by one. But really no updates, substantial updates have been made since the last meeting. We did figure out communication contact on this first PDF is just going to stay as info@southgate.ca, so people can reach out through that email as needed. Again, I'll just quickly go over the 3 different documents. This one just provides a quick overview of affordable housing in Southgate, what that means, some figures that kind of look to outline the problem that we're experiencing in regards to housing supply, people not meeting the criteria of living with affordable housing, and people on waiting lists for to get into affordable housing units. So just trying to show that this problem does exist here, specifically in Southgate and Grey County as a whole. So the only change made to this one was the contact info@southgate.ca. For the second one, I believe no changes were made to this. This just outlines as many local and Southgate, I guess it's not really Southgate specific, but Grey County specific resources that tenants in need, people experiencing homelessness, and people across the spectrum of needing housing can access. I believe the first 5 or 4 direct are linked to Grey County Housing's website, and there's a lot of information that can be accessed there, as well as 211, which was mentioned by Anne Marie for emergency shelter, and then as well as some your rights as tenants and some other applicable resources. So I think it's just helpful, these it's not always the easiest to find where these things are located across these different websites. So just one central resource might be easier for some people. And it also, it's a good resource for us to have to distribute if people have questions or are looking for information like this. We can go to the third one now. This one has the most changes since last meeting. I basically was looking to promote, as Clinton had actually just mentioned, promoting additional units, rental units in Southgate is probably the quickest way to increase housing supply and in turn increase affordable housing. So I just did a very basic kind of, if people, maybe homeowners, maybe were not thinking of putting in a rental unit, or I don't know, having something that could trigger that and maybe result in them adding units to their house, that is just kind of laid out there. It's a lot more complicated, obviously. If you're going to put a new rental unit on, you need building permits and possible rezoning and lots of stuff. But I think it can just be promoted to, have people start to think about it. And if they want to rent an existing unit on their property, it is quite easy. I just included some resources to the Landlords and Tenant Board of Ontario there, some resources about creating advertisements and how you can advertise an empty unit, and then the link for the standardized lease agreement that all landlords are required to use by the Ontario government. I added on some rental figures. I was just trying to find stuff that promoted people possibly becoming landlords, which wasn't the easiest information to find. I had that $2,600 figure on the last version. So, you can kind of supplement some income from it, although it isn't a very high number. It's still something. And the other figure I found was that plus 24%, which just shows over the last 10 years that, there's a lot more people that are needing rented units. So I think if potential landlords could see that, hey, there might be a market if I put this up, or there very likely is, that could hopefully maybe start down the direction we're looking for. And those two links at the bottom are just some more information from the Landlord and Tenant Board about renting in Ontario and how to properly claim your rental income from the Government of Canada. So those are the three documents I put together for, ones that I would hope to be hosted and pushed out through Southgate's appropriate social media channels. I just had one little document at the end that outlined how I would hope these would be distributed. Like I just said, hopefully host on Southgate's website, social media channels as applicable and appropriate. And then I was hoping maybe they could be released like on a weekly basis, not just push out 3 at once, just kind of put them out with a bit of a delay. So that's what I have. I hope that all makes sense based on the feedback I received last meeting. And if everyone is good with that, I would like to push that forward to council, whatever the process would be to get those live.
Okay. Vero, you had a comment, thought?
I really like Jordan's idea of promoting a theme each week, or whatever frequency we decide on, because what was going through my head with the especially with the possibility of creating rental spaces as second units or whatever on people's properties, was that one we could really promote immediately. And I don't know how many people are aware of, what the legislation has changed and what that means for them, or could mean for them. But I'm thinking like the Facebook for sure, the social media, but also the paper, the Dundalk Herald, and putting something in there that explains what you're suggesting in your outline. Because if more people knew, maybe more rental units would be created for people. I just heard of a family today, a family of 4 that had got reno-evicted, and 9 months after moving to their second place then are being evicted because the property's being sold and they have nowhere to go and few resources for finding another place. So I think, we just need to do whatever we can right now for people.
Okay. Question to you, Holly. Do we have any kind of a break or any kind of a budget, do you suppose, to advertise or to put this material into the local papers?
I would have to look into it. Currently, I know that we budgeted for mileage for members, but because we are virtual, we had used that budget to send NOLA to the housing continuum, I believe it was called. So I'd have to look and see what was left. It's not something that we usually budget for at the start of the year. I certainly can look and follow up by email, just double check with our finance department tomorrow.
I'm wondering if we might approach the editor of the Dundalk Herald Flesherton Advance and sort of sell the idea of this as a community service, a community information piece. And maybe they would then take a look at it as a news article, at a report on this committee as a report of what this committee has done, and sort of get around the money end of it that way. Do you want to do that, Holly, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I was gonna suggest, why don't I look into the budget and then just I can follow up, and then certainly can discuss ways that we can reach out to the Herald. So if you leave it with me, I can do that. And then in terms of approval to council, I did craft a resolution anticipating that this would happen, so I can share it now. But if there's more discussion, certainly we can have that first.
Any more thoughts? I think you've just done a bang up job, Jordan.
So the resolution would be that the committee approve the communication strategy as presented, that the committee recommend that council receive the communication strategy for information, and that the committee recommend that council approve the communication strategy as presented. And then once we have the approval, we could work on getting it posted following the timelines that Jordan has created. And then just in terms of timing, I did speak with Lindsay today, and this is something that she can take to council for the 2nd. So we likely will have an update for the 18th, just to not inundate Clint with I know he's got a lot of planning reports and he's got the other 2. So this is something that I can work on, and Lindsay can take our clerk to the next meeting.
Sure. Okay, you've seen the resolution. Would anyone like to move that? Muriel, seconder. Sorry, Carolyn. So that is supported by this committee, and thank you very much, Jordan, for all your hard work on that, and thank you to you, Holly, for pursuing the ways that it can be pushed out into the community and be made a valuable resource for the community. Okay. Moving on, item number 8, correspondence. You've had a chance to see these items. If there is discussion on anything, this would be a time to bring it forward. If not, we would look for a resolution to accept correspondence. Joan moved, seconder. Oh, I'm sorry, Joan, did you have a comment?
Yes, sorry. I just wanted to comment on the understanding homelessness, as Muriel just said, about a family that will be living nowhere soon, because homelessness have so much factors, and sometimes it's not that somebody can pay their rent, or they didn't pay their rent, or they don't want it. It's just landlord and tenant. And Jordan, I love the report, but there is so much to it when it comes back to landlord and tenants, because a lot of what is happening now is that we have landlords that have their houses, and they had come into Dundalk at a very low interest rate. And then when interest rate was down, everybody was buying. And now that the rates are up, they're increasing the rent, and their mortgage have been increased too. And the tenants cannot afford to pay what they're asking for now. And also, in order to keep their mortgages, they have to get rid of the tenant, as Muriel said, renovation or eviction, whatever, to kind of get back enough money to pay their mortgage. So it is such a, it's not a win-win situation anymore. It's just a lose-lose situation. And I'm trying to think about, how are we going to help this? How are we going to counteract these kinds of problems? So yeah, understanding homelessness from the perspective of 3 different Mid-City is a good read, and I will suggest that everybody read it if they have the time. I know I steal some time out of my time to make sure that I read it. Thank you.
Well, I think also keeping Anne-Marie Shaw and Grey County apprised of our situation in Southgate. Not that they are probably not aware, but every one of these situations that we hear about, and also to try to maybe connect, if there is a service out there. I've always felt over the years that I was doing work that the only thing worse than not having a service would be to have some kind of a support or service and nobody knows about it or not able to access it. So I think using Anne-Marie's suggestions tonight, the 211, calling the Grey County housing number. Also, I think using our local resources like Community Health Center. And again, not that they aren't very aware of what's going on, but the more times they hear about issues in our area, maybe that gets into a communication chain that ends up someplace where it can be, something can be done about it. So any other thoughts on correspondence? Motion to receive the items. Carolyn, seconder, Joan. That is resolved, and so we'll receive those items. Just before we go to the next meeting, if anyone has ideas for a speaker that you think would be of value for the committee to hear, please forward those ideas either to Martin or to Holly or myself. If anyone sees information that they think the committee as a whole would be interested in and that helps us with our current things that we're dealing with, please forward that. Probably the best thing is to forward it to you, Holly, and then Holly will distribute it to the committee. That way we know everybody's getting it. Okay, next meeting will be Tuesday, August the 15th, 2023 at 6 p.m. It'll be virtual. And at this point, before we adjourn, again, thank you. Thanks to Holly for keeping us straight. Thanks to Alicia for all the work that you do. Thanks, Clint, for joining us this evening and contributing to our discussion. Thank you to all the committee members, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Carolyn, do we need a seconder? We do. Okay, Muriel. Okay, thank you all for your time.